Hello, horror listeners. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for the channel. Also, make sure to tell us in the comments how you like the story and from where you are watching or listening. If you want to hear any specific story, feel free to request it. Now let's begin the story. I still remember the smell of fresh paint in that house the first time we stepped inside. It was early June, hot enough in Texas that the asphalt shimmered, and the realtor's perfume mixed with the faint tang of new carpet glue. My daughter Emma had been the first to run through the empty living room, her sneakers squeaking against the hardwood. She was 9 then, tiny but fearless, her ponytail bouncing as she darted through every doorway like she was testing the house's heartbeat. "Dad, my room's huge!" she yelled from the upstairs hallway. Her voice was so full of life that for a moment I let myself believe the move was more than just a desperate attempt to start over. Because the truth was, we weren't moving for the schools or the quiet cul-de-sac or the family-friendly neighborhood the realtor bragged about. We were moving because I couldn't breathe in our old house anymore. Emma's mom, my wife Rachel, died in that house. A stroke. Fast, cruel, the kind of thing doctors call unpreventable, like that word is supposed to make it easier. I'd walked into the kitchen one Saturday morning and found her on the floor, her coffee cup shattered near her hand. Emma was the one who dialed 911 while I tried CPR with shaking hands. She was 5. You don't forget that kind of morning. You don't forget the sound of your child screaming, "Mommy, wake up!" You don't forget the emptiness afterward. So the house had to go. Too many ghosts in those walls. That's how we ended up in Clearwater, Texas, a suburban town with big skies, endless fields, and neighborhoods where the houses all looked the same, but everyone swore they were different. For a while it worked. I threw myself into raising Emma, shielding her from everything, maybe too much. If she fell on the playground, I was the dad sprinting across the mulch before the teacher even stood up. If a stranger so much as smiled at her in the grocery store, I repositioned the cart like a human barricade. When she was little, she didn't question it, but kids grow. By the time she hit 13, the friction started. Emma wanted independence. I wanted guarantees. She wanted to walk to school with her friends. I wanted her within arm's reach. Every conversation turned into a negotiation I was too scared to lose. "Dad, I'm not glass," she'd mutter, and I'd answer without thinking. Glass doesn't bleed. But underneath it all, she never stopped loving me, and I never stopped loving her. That bond was our lifeline. It was a Saturday in late October, the kind of day where the air feels heavier, like the season itself is holding its breath. Emma was 16 now, taller, sharper, with the kind of sarcasm only teenagers can wield. I was supposed to work the night shift at the shipping yard. Normally, I'd have begged my boss to swap, but we were behind schedule, and bills don't wait for fear. "Dad, I'll be fine," Emma said that afternoon. She sat at the kitchen island, flipping through her phone, earbuds dangling. "I'm not a kid. You can go." I tried to sound casual. "I could ask Mrs. Delgado next door to check in." Her eyes narrowed. "Seriously? You're gonna get the neighbor to babysit me? I'm 16. That one hit. Hard. I forced a laugh I didn't feel. Okay. Just lock the doors, don't open for anyone, and text me if you hear so much as a creak." She smirked. "Yes, sir, Captain Paranoid." I hugged her anyway, longer than she liked. "I love you, Em." She squirmed but whispered back, "Love you too, Dad." That was enough to get me out the door. The shift dragged. The clatter of forklifts, the stink of diesel, the endless tick of the wall clock. But it wasn't the work making my stomach twist. It was the silence. Emma hadn't texted. No updates, no emojis, nothing. At 9:47 p.m., I caved. I pulled out my phone and typed, "Everything okay?" No reply. 10 minutes later, "Emma?" Still nothing. By 10:30, panic had its claws in me. I pictured every nightmare: fire, intruder, accident. My hands shook so badly I dropped a box cutter. Then the phone buzzed. Relief hit so hard I almost fell. Her text read, "Dad, I think someone's outside." My blood ran cold. I called instantly. She answered on the second ring, her whisper trembling. "Dad? I'm here, baby. What's happening?" I heard footsteps on the back porch, and I think I saw someone through the blinds. My vision blurred with fear. Emma, listen to me. Go upstairs. Lock yourself in my room. Stay on the line. I was already sprinting toward the supervisor's office, yelling something about an emergency. My car keys bit into my palm. On the phone, I heard her quick, shallow breaths, the creak of the stairs under her feet. Okay, I'm in your room. Door locked. Good, stay quiet. I'm 5 minutes away. There was silence for a moment, then a sound that made my heart collapse. 3 loud bangs against the back door. Emma screamed, Dad, they're trying to get in. I drove like a man possessed, blowing through red lights, the world smeared into streaks of color. Every second was a lifetime. Stay hidden, Emma. Don't make a sound, I ordered. On the other end, I heard her sobbing, muffled, like she'd buried her face in the pillow. Then, a new noise, glass breaking, the back door. My chest caved. Emma, stay upstairs. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, the creak of our floorboards. Dad, she whispered, they're inside. When I turned onto our street, the sight nearly broke me. Our porch light was on, the front door half open, swaying like a mouth gasping for air. I didn't wait. I ran. Inside, the air was sharp with the smell of alcohol and sweat. A man's voice echoed from the hallway, low, slurred. Come on out, sweetheart. Don't make this hard. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a heavy wrench from the toolbox by the entryway. My body moved on pure instinct. My fear burned into something sharper. I took the stairs 2 at a time. The intruder was already at my bedroom door, jiggling the handle, muttering curses. He didn't hear me until it was too late. The wrench cracked against his skull with a sickening thud. He staggered, turned, his face pale, wild-eyed, a stranger reeking of beer and gun oil. He lunged, but I swung again, harder. He collapsed against the banister, unconscious, maybe worse. The whole house went silent. I pounded on the bedroom door. Emma, it's me! The lock clicked. She flew into my arms, shaking so violently I thought her bones might break. Dad, I was so scared. I know, baby. I know, you're safe now. The cops came 20 minutes later. They cuffed the man, our neighbor's cousin, high on pills, drunk out of his mind, looking for easy cash. They said we were lucky. So damn lucky. But luck doesn't erase the sound of your child screaming on the phone. It doesn't erase the image of a shadow crossing your daughter's window. It doesn't erase the thought of what could have happened if I'd been 1 minute later. That night changed me. It changed us. I still fight the fear. Therapy helps. Time helps. Emma's in college now, living 3 hours away in Austin. She calls me every night, half for her, half for me. I still want to tell her to lock her windows, to never walk alone, to always double-check the deadbolt. Sometimes I do, but most nights I just say, I love you, Em. Good night. Because love isn't locking someone in a cage. Love is giving them the strength to face the world, even when the world is terrifying. And God, that's the hardest thing I've ever had to learn. Story 2, I was 17 the fall. Everything shifted. Not in the usual senior year changes your life kind of way. I mean the kind of shift you feel in your bones years later, when you're lying awake at 3 in the morning, replaying the same what-ifs until your stomach knots. My name's Ethan Walker, and I grew up in Crestwood, Ohio, a small suburb about 40 minutes outside of Cleveland. Crestwood wasn't the kind of place where bad things happened. At least that's what people like to tell themselves. 2-story houses lined up like copy-paste jobs, cul-de-sacs filled with basketball hoops and mailboxes with little flags bent from years of use. We had block parties in the summer, fireworks on the 4th of July, and neighbors who waved from their driveways while mowing the lawn. On the surface, it was safe, almost boring, and maybe that's why what happened that night hit me so hard, because it wasn't supposed to happen here. My parents, Mark and Karen Walker, were the cautious type. Dad worked in IT for a bank downtown, the kind of guy who double-checked the locks every night, even though Crestwood's crime rate was laughably low. Mom was a pediatric nurse, practical and grounded. I also had an older sister, Emily, who was away at college in Michigan. That left just me, 17 and stubborn, itching for independence. I'd stayed home alone plenty of times before. My parents liked to joke that I was more responsible than Emily because I didn't throw parties or do anything stupid. Truthfully, I didn't because I was the type who overthought everything. Still, I liked the freedom. Being in the house without anyone telling me to turn the volume down, eating junk food at midnight, walking around in pajamas all day. So when mom and dad planned a week-long trip to visit old friends in Seattle that September, I wasn't nervous at all. Excited even they'd be gone Sunday to Saturday, leaving me in charge of the house and our golden retriever. Milo mom must have reminded me about 50 times before they left mom. Set the alarm every night, don't open the door for strangers. Call us if you need anything. Ethan. Mom, I'm fine, I've got this. Seriously, Dad. And don't forget trash day on Tuesday, and keep the garage door locked. We had that issue with it sticking last winter. Me rolling my eyes, yes. Dad, trash, garage, alarm. Got it. They finally left that Sunday morning. The house felt huge and quiet after the sound of their suitcases rolled out the door. I'd already planned how to spend my week, finish a few assignments, binge some horror movies, and maybe invite my best friend Ryan over. Ryan had been my closest friend since middle school. The kind of guy who could make a joke even when things felt tense. That first night, Monday, Ryan came over with 2 pizzas and a backpack full of DVDs. We stayed up past midnight, laughing, tossing crusts to Milo, and arguing over whether The Conjuring was scarier than Hereditary. Ryan smirking. Dude, you act tough, but I saw you flinch during the jump scare. Me, that wasn't a flinch, I was stretching Ryan right. Sure, totally, it was the perfect start to the week, but everything changed the night after Ryan had to leave early. It was Tuesday, September 14th, early fall. The air was crisp enough that I cracked open the upstairs window to let the breeze in. Around 8:30 p.m., Ryan got a text from his mom. Ryan, crap, I gotta head out. My mom's got some early thing tomorrow and needs the car. Me, frowning. Already? You were supposed to stay, man. Ryan, I'll come back tomorrow. Promise. You'll survive one night alone. He left around 9. By then, the house felt quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears. Milo curled up on the couch beside me as I flipped through channels. At 10, I decided to crash in my parents' bedroom instead of mine. Their bed was huge and they had the better TV. I went through the nightly routine, locked the doors, set the alarm, filled Milo's water bowl. Everything normal. I remember brushing my teeth and thinking how ordinary it all felt. Just another boring night in Crestwood. I wish I could freeze that moment, because it was the last time things felt normal. I just started dozing off when the sound shattered the night. The house alarm, that piercing siren ripped through the halls, echoing so loud it felt like it was inside my chest. Milo jumped up, barking furiously at the door. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stared at the glowing panel near the bedroom door, red lights flashing. My mind scrambled. Did I set it wrong? Did the wind trip a sensor? But I knew I hadn't. I'd locked everything. I'd set it like always. The only way it went off was if a door opened. My hands trembled as I slammed the bedroom door shut and turned the lock. Milo barked louder, pacing, ears perked. My parents kept a revolver in their nightstand. I'd never even touched it, but in that moment I yanked the drawer open and grabbed it. The weight felt unreal in my hands. I flicked the safety like I'd seen in movies and aimed it at the door, my breathing ragged. Seconds dragged like hours. Finally, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. Dispatcher. 911. What's your emergency? Me, whispering. My alarm went off. I'm home alone. I think someone's inside. Dispatcher, calm. Okay, stay on the line. Officers are on their way. Lock the door and don't move. You're doing great. I pressed the phone to my ear with one hand, the gun aimed at the door with the other. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. My skin prickled, sweat dripping down my back. Milo barked once more, then went eerily still, his gaze fixed on the bottom of the door. I will never forget that moment. After what felt like eternity, though it was only 5 minutes, the dispatcher told me the officers were outside. I forced myself to unlock the bedroom and turn off the alarm. 2 officers stood at the front door, flashlights cutting through the dark. They asked questions, checked the perimeter, then said the words that still haunt me. Officer, no signs of forced entry? Could have been the garage door sensor. Those malfunction sometimes. Me, do you want to check inside? Officer, that's up to you. Want us to sweep the place? And like an idiot, I shook my head. Me. No, I think it's fine. They promised to patrol the neighborhood and left. I shut the door behind them and stood in the foyer, my pulse still racing. I was about to reset the alarm when I noticed something. The system wouldn't arm. It only did that if a door wasn't closed. My stomach dropped. I walked slowly through the house, revolver in hand. Milo pressed to my side. Every door looked fine, until I reached the one to the garage. It was wide open. I froze, breath caught in my throat. The overhead light flicked on with a click, revealing nothing but shadows stretching across the concrete. The two small windows were intact, no broken glass. But someone had opened that door. I stepped in, gun raised, my heart slamming against my ribs. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and cut grass. I checked behind the car, the corners, even inside the storage cabinets. Nothing. Still, the certainty sat heavy in my chest. Someone had been there. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and reset the alarm. Then I searched the entire house, closets, under beds, behind curtains, until exhaustion finally forced me to collapse back in my parents' room. I slept with the gun under my pillow, Milo pressed against my legs. For the rest of the week, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. Every sound, every creak, every gust of wind set me on edge. I barely slept. When my parents returned, Dad checked everything again. No damage, no forced entry, nothing out of place. His theory was the same as the officers, that the garage door hadn't latched and a draft blew it open. But I know what I felt that night, that sense that someone was in the house, someone who slipped away when the siren screamed. Someone who could have been standing right outside my parents' bedroom door while I aimed a shaking revolver at it. It's been 6 years and I still live with it. I'm 23 now, living in a small apartment in Columbus. But I can't sleep without checking every lock twice. I can't fall asleep without replaying the memory of Milo staring at that door like he could see what I couldn't. People tell me it was just a malfunction, a draft, my imagination. But late at night, when the world is quiet, I can still hear the siren in my head, and I can still feel that certainty. Someone was there, watching, waiting, and I was never really alone. Story 3. I was 15 the night I learned that home isn't always the safest place. My name is Ethan Miller, and I grew up in a suburb called Maplewood Heights in Ohio. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else. White fences, two-car garages, kids riding bikes until dinner. The sort of neighborhood you'd bet money nothing bad could ever touch. But life doesn't care about your bets. I wasn't supposed to stay home alone that weekend. My mom and dad had been planning to drive out of town for my cousin Claire's graduation in Pittsburgh. It was a big deal. Family photos, long speeches, boring hotel dinners. The kind of trip I usually got dragged along for. But this time, I asked to stay behind. "Are you sure about this?" Mom had asked me the night before. She stood at the kitchen counter, folding laundry while eyeing me like I'd just volunteered for a death wish. "Yes, Mom," I said, trying not to sound desperate. "I've got finals next week. I'll get more studying done here than sitting through Aunt Janet's slideshow of Claire's baby pictures." Dad laughed from the couch. He's not wrong about that. Still, I could see the hesitation in Mom's face. She was protective. Ever since the divorce from my dad 5 years ago, she'd carried this constant weight of needing to keep everything together, to keep me safe. "I'll be fine," I said, softer this time. "I've got Duke." Duke was our German shepherd, 90 pounds of muscle and loyalty, with a bark that could rattle windows. He wasn't just a pet, he was family. Mom sighed and finally nodded. "Okay, but keep the doors locked. No parties, no friends over, and answer my calls, Ethan, every time. I promise." I meant it. At the time, it sounded easy. A quiet house, a stocked fridge, a weekend of freedom. What could go wrong? Saturday started normal. The smell of coffee drifted through the house while Mom rushed around gathering last-minute things. Dad, always calmer, wheeled his suitcase out to the car and gave me one of those half-hugs men give when they're trying not to get sentimental. "You'll be fine, champ," he said. "Duke's got your back. And remember, emergency's only on my card, okay?" "Got it." Mom wasn't so quick to let go. She hugged me tight, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Call me if anything feels off." I rolled my eyes playfully. "It's Maplewood Heights, Mom. The scariest thing around here is Mrs. Callahan's casserole." She didn't laugh. She just gave me that long look, like she was memorizing my face, then finally walked out the door. I watched their SUV disappear down the street until the taillights vanished. The silence that followed felt enormous. The house felt like mine. I tossed my books aside, raided the fridge, and sprawled on the couch with Duke at my feet. The TV flickered through a marathon of old horror movies, and I couldn't help but laugh at how fake everything looked. Blood that was way too red, villains that announced their presence like they wanted to get caught. If that was real life, they'd be in jail in 10 minutes, I muttered. Duke tilted his head at me like he agreed. I spent most of the afternoon like that, snacking, scrolling through my phone, half studying. Normal, safe. At around 7:30 p.m., I let Duke out into the backyard. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky with that weird mix of pink and purple. I leaned against the doorframe, sipping a soda, when Duke froze mid-step. He wasn't sniffing around like usual. His body stiffened, ears pricked, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "What is it, boy?" I whispered. That's when I saw her. She was standing just beyond the chain-link fence, half hidden by the shadows of the oak trees. At first glance, she looked ordinary, mid-30s maybe, shoulder-length hair, baggy sweatshirt. But there was something wrong in the way she stood there, too still, too quiet. "You've got a beautiful dog," she said finally, her voice scratchy, like someone who smoked a pack a day. My throat went dry. Thanks," I said, keeping my hand on the sliding door. "Can I pet him?" she asked, tilting her head too far, too slow. Duke's growl deepened. His teeth flashed in the porch light. I swallowed hard. "He doesn't like strangers. Sorry." For a moment, she just stared at me. Her smile twitched at the corners, like it was being forced onto her face. Then she whispered something I couldn't catch, turned, and melted into the trees. I locked the door so fast I nearly slammed Duke's tail. I tried to shake it off. People walk through backyards sometimes, right? Maybe she was lost or drunk or from the apartments down the road. But my gut wouldn't let it go. Neither would Duke. He paced the living room, ears flat, eyes glued to the back door, like he expected it to open any second. I grabbed my phone and texted Mom. Some weird lady was standing by the fence asking to pet Duke. Mom, that's strange. Probably someone from the neighborhood. Just keep the doors locked, okay? Already did. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But then, at 8:50, the doorbell rang. The sound jolted me so hard I spilled soda across the couch. Duke went ballistic, barking, snarling, claws scrabbling at the hardwood as he lunged toward the front door. My heart hammered. Nobody was supposed to be here. I crept forward just enough to peek through the peephole. Empty porch. No delivery man, no neighbor, no one. Just the faint echo of footsteps fading into the night. I backed away, locked the deadbolt tighter, and whispered, "Not funny." Duke barked again, this time at the side window. That's when I heard it. A faint, deliberate click, click, click at the glass, like someone testing the lock. My blood turned to ice. I dropped to the floor, crawling until I was out of sight of the window. Duke stayed by me, muscles coiled, a snarl ripping from his chest. The clicking stopped. Silence. Then, crash. Not from my house, from next door. I scrambled to the window, pulling the curtain back just an inch. The Johnsons' house sat dark, quiet, until a shadow slipped through the shattered back window. Her, the same woman. Adrenaline surged. I fumbled my phone, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. 911. What's your emergency? There's a break-in, I whispered. Next door. A woman, she broke the window. She's inside. Please, you need to hurry. Stay on the line. Officers are on their way. Can you describe her? I gave what I could. Thin brown hair, sweatshirt. My voice cracked halfway through. Then came the scream. A man's scream. My neighbor, Mr. Johnson. He stumbled into view through the window, grappling with her. She wasn't just breaking in. She was attacking him. "She's hurting him," I shouted into the phone. The operator told me to stay calm, to stay inside, but her voice felt a million miles away. Because in the middle of the struggle, the woman's head snapped toward my house. Her eyes locked on mine through the gap in the curtain, and she smiled. Sirens split the night. Red and blue lights washed over the street. The woman shrieked like an animal as officers stormed the Johnsons' yard. It took 3 of them to drag her out, and even then she kicked, spat, screamed words I'll never forget. "I'll kill him. That boy, him and that dog, I'll burn them alive." The knife and gun they pulled from her sweatshirt made my stomach twist. I stayed on the floor, clutching Duke, tears running hot down my face. By the time my parents got home at dawn, I was still there. Arms around Duke, eyes wide, shaking. For weeks I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sent panic flooding through me. Duke wouldn't leave my side, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smile. That knowing, hateful smile aimed straight at me. If she'd chosen my house instead of the Johnsons, I wouldn't be here telling you this. So if you're reading this, remember, lock your doors. Don't assume your neighborhood is safe, because sometimes danger doesn't knock. Sometimes it waits until you're alone. Story 4. I was 10 years old the summer my world split into a before and after. Back then, life was simple in my little corner of Havenbrook, Ohio, a sleepy suburban town where front doors stayed unlocked, where neighbors borrowed sugar without asking, and kids rode bikes until the streetlights blinked on. My name is Emily Carter. I lived with my mom, dad, and my older brother Ryan in a 1-story ranch house on Willow Lane. Our house wasn't fancy, but it was home. The siding was pale blue, the shutters a faded white. The backyard had an old swing set that squeaked when the wind caught it. Life was ordinary, almost boring, until the day it wasn't. It started like any other June morning. The sun spilled through my curtains, lighting up the posters on my wall. Horses, a couple of boy band cutouts from teen magazines. I rolled out of bed in my unicorn pajamas, rubbing my eyes, already buzzing with excitement. No school, no homework, just a whole day of freedom. I padded to the kitchen, the linoleum cool against my bare feet. Mom had left early for her shift at St. Mary's Dental Clinic, and Dad was already at the factory. Ryan was at a friend's house for a week-long sleepover, which meant, for the first time in what felt like forever, I was completely alone, and I loved it. I poured myself a bowl of Lucky Charms, the marshmallows clinking against the spoon. The TV in the living room flickered with Saturday morning cartoons. Everything felt bright, safe, and normal, until the phone rang. At first, it didn't even register as strange. We had one of those beige cordless phones on the counter by the fridge. Back then, phones didn't ring that often in the morning. Maybe it was Mom checking in, or Dad asking if I fed the dog. I hopped down from the couch, padded to the kitchen, and pressed talk. "Hello?" The voice that answered was warm, friendly, a man's voice, familiar in a way that made me instantly relax, though I couldn't place it. "Hey, Emily," he said. "How's your morning going?" My chest swelled a little. I was 10, and there was something comforting about an adult knowing my name, asking about my day. "It's good," I said brightly. "I had cereal, and I'm watching cartoons." He chuckled, low and easy. "That sounds fun. You're growing up fast, huh?" I smiled without thinking. "I guess so." Then he asked, "So, what are you wearing?" My spoon clattered into the sink. The question was so out of place, so strange, that my brain stuttered. Pajamas," I said, shifting uncomfortably. There was silence on the line. Then his voice changed. It dropped into something harsh, ragged, like gravel sliding down glass. "You look so cute in those unicorn pajamas." My stomach dropped. I froze, staring at the phone like it had just turned into a snake in my hand. My voice came out small. "What?" He laughed. It wasn't the friendly laugh from before. It was low, ugly, heavy with something I didn't understand, but could feel like grease on my skin. "I'm watching you, Emily." The world tilted. My knees nearly gave out. He kept talking. Words I can't bring myself to repeat. Things a child should never hear. Promises that made my skin crawl. descriptions that made me feel like he was inside the room with me. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd throw up. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Then, reflex, I slammed my thumb on the talk button, cutting him off. For a moment, I just stood there staring at my trembling reflection in the darkened microwave door. Had I imagined it? Was it some horrible prank? But then, the phone rang again. The shrill sound ripped through the kitchen. I jumped so hard I knocked over my juice. It rang and rang, relentless, like it wasn't going to stop until I answered. I didn't. I just stood there, breathing fast, my whole body buzzing like static. Finally, it stopped. I exhaled shakily, trying to convince myself it was over. That's when it rang again. And again. And again. Each pause between rings stretched out like a held breath, as if he was giving me time to think about him, about his words, before forcing me to hear that sound again. In a blind panic, I dialed Mom's work number with clumsy fingers. She picked up on the third ring. "Mom," I sobbed, "someone's calling me. He knows my name. He knows what I'm wearing. He said he's watching me." Her voice was sharp, annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. "Emily, how many times have I told you not to answer the phone when we're not home?" "No, Mom, you don't understand. That's enough," she snapped. "It's probably just a prank. Don't answer the phone again. Watch TV. You're fine." "No, he said, Emily, enough." Her voice dropped the way it did when I pushed too far. "I cannot leave work right now. You are fine. Stop being dramatic." Click. The line went dead. I stood there gripping the receiver, staring at the silent phone. Fine. She said I was fine. But I wasn't, because the phone started ringing again. This time I didn't wait. I bolted. I slammed the curtain shut, heart racing, every shadow stretching long and menacing. I could swear I heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. The phone kept ringing. Finally, I did the only thing I could think of. I dialed 911. My voice shook so hard I barely got the words out. I'm home alone. Someone keeps calling me. He knows my name. He said he's watching me. He said he's going to kill me." The operator's voice was calm, steady, like an anchor in a storm. "Emily, I want you to stay on the line with me, okay? Help is on the way. Can you lock the doors?" I scrambled, flipping locks, checking windows. But every movement made me feel like I was too slow, like he was already inside, standing right behind me. And then, another sound split the air. Not the phone this time. A creak from the back of the house. I froze, blood roaring in my ears. "Emily, what's happening?" the operator asked. My mouth worked soundlessly. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And then instinct took over. I hit the red panic button by the front door, the one Dad had told me to only press in emergencies, and bolted outside, barefoot into the glaring sunlight. The ordinary sounds of summer hit me like a slap. Birdsong, a lawnmower down the street, the squeak of a swing. But inside, that phone was still ringing. A neighbor, Mr. Daniels, saw me and came running. His face blurred through my tears as he crouched down, hands on my shoulders. "Emily, what happened? Are you hurt?" I couldn't get the words out, just sobs, broken pieces. "Phone man said he's watching, going to kill me." Sirens wailed in the distance, the sweetest sound I've ever heard. It felt like hours before the police car screeched into the driveway. An officer crouched in front of me, gentle but firm. "Emily, you're safe now. Can you tell me what happened?" I tried. But how do you tell an adult the things you just heard when you're only 10? I stumbled through the words, leaving out the worst parts. Just repeating, "He said he was watching me. He said he was going to kill me." And then Mom arrived. Her heels clicked on the driveway. Her expression was calm. Too calm. She smiled at the officer like she'd just arrived at a barbecue, not an emergency. "I'm so sorry about this," she said smoothly. "She must have gotten scared being home alone. Overreacted." The officer nodded politely, like he'd heard it before. Overreacted. That word cut deeper than anything that man said, because it meant no one believed me, not even her. The phone calls stopped after that day, but the fear didn't. For years, I refused to stay home alone. Every time a phone rang, my stomach twisted into knots. I never found out who it was, never learned how he knew my name, my clothes, my life. But sometimes when the phone rings late at night, I still hesitate before picking it up, because in the back of my mind, I wonder if he's still there, watching, waiting, smiling. Story 5. I never thought living alone would change me the way it did. My name is Ethan Miller, and in the fall of 2019, I rented a small 2-bedroom townhouse in Cedar Grove, Virginia. Back then, I was 25, fresh out of a breakup that left me hollow and desperate for some place quiet where I could start over. The townhouse wasn't fancy. Cream-colored siding, an old oak tree leaning across the narrow front yard, and a cracked driveway that barely fit my beat-up Honda. But when I first walked inside, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. The silence wrapped around me like a blanket. No roommates, no arguments, no constant reminders of the life I was trying to leave behind. Just me. The place had 2 floors. Downstairs was the kitchen and living room, plain but cozy. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms. One I used as my own, and the other as a small office where I worked my remote IT job. The unit connected to another identical townhouse, but when I moved in, that one was empty. The property manager, a short, friendly guy named Rick, told me no one had even inquired about it in months. That suited me fine. An empty neighbor meant no noise, no drama. For the first few weeks, I loved it. After years of crowded apartments and a messy relationship, the solitude felt like medicine. Nights were quiet except for crickets and the occasional car on the distant highway. I'd sit at my desk by the window, watching the orange glow of the street lamp flicker against the rain or the drifting autumn leaves. But sometimes, the silence felt too deep, too heavy, like the kind of silence that wasn't just empty, but waiting. It was late October, a Friday night. Rain had started just after sunset, tapping steadily against the windows. I was upstairs in my office finishing up some tickets for work. My laptop screen glowed in the dim lamplight, and the rest of the room was soaked in shadow. Around 8:15, I heard it. Thump. A dull, heavy sound against the wall beside me. I froze, staring at the beige paint and cheap drywall. That wall separated me from the empty townhouse. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Old buildings make noise. Rain makes things shift. No big deal. But then it came again, slower this time, heavier. Thump. My pulse quickened. I muttered, probably just the wind. Or pipes. But the truth was, it sounded exactly like someone hitting the wall with a closed fist. I tried to focus on work. For the next hour, noises came and went. Soft creaks, faint knocks, like footsteps moving across the empty neighbor's floor. They weren't constant, which made it worse. I'd just start to feel normal, and then, creak. My stomach would tighten. By 9:30, I heard something that shattered my nerves. A door opening, slow, deliberate, then closing harder, like someone pushed it shut. I whispered to myself, nope, not possible. That unit's empty. Still, I couldn't shake the dread. I stood and forced myself into the hall. The upstairs felt suffocating, air heavy in my chest. I crept down the stairs, each step groaning under my weight. The living room was dark except for the weak light seeping through the blinds. I checked the front door, locked. The back door, locked. Windows, latched tight. Everything looked untouched. I tried to laugh at myself. Get a grip, Ethan. You're freaking yourself out. I went back upstairs, promising myself I'd finish just 30 more minutes of work before bed. By 10 o'clock, I shut my laptop. I turned off the office lamp and stepped into the hallway. That's when I heard it. Whistling, software slow, a tune I didn't recognize. Not cheerful, not rushed, calm, deliberate, almost playful. My blood turned to ice. I whispered, no, no, no. It had to be outside. It had to. But as I crept closer to the top of the stairs, the sound grew clearer. It wasn't outside. It was inside. My body moved on instinct. I padded down the stairs barefoot, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. The whistling didn't stop. It was steady, unhurried. I pressed my back to the wall and leaned just enough to see into the living room. And there he was, a man, sitting in my armchair, facing the dark TV screen. He didn't move except for the slow rise and fall of his shoulders. His head tilted slightly, lips pursed as he whistled that same hollow tune. In the dim light from the street lamp, I could make out his silhouette, and in his hand, a faint metallic glint, a gun. My breath caught in my throat. Every muscle screamed to run, but my legs felt bolted in place. He had to know I was there. He had to have heard me, but he didn't turn. He just kept whistling. Calm as death. I didn't think, I just moved. I bolted for the front door, ripping it open so hard it slammed against the wall. Cold rain splashed across my skin as I ran barefoot into the night, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached the end of the street. My hands shook violently as I fumbled for my phone. When I finally looked back, I saw it. The door of the empty townhouse next to mine stood wide open. 2 cruisers came within minutes, lights painting the rain in red and blue. My voice shook as I explained, pointing toward the houses. The officers approached cautiously, and then the whistling started again, that same slow, eerie tune, drifting out into the wet night. Guns drawn, they entered. When they emerged minutes later, one officer's face was pale, his jaw tight. "He was sitting in your chair," the officer said, his voice low. "Didn't move, didn't resist, just stopped whistling when we grabbed him." They told me later. No ID, no fingerprints in any system, no record. He barely spoke a word. Some cops thought he was sick, maybe delusional. Others thought he wanted to be caught. But no one could tell me why my house. Why that night? Why that tune? I moved out within a week. Couldn't step foot back inside without my chest tightening like a vice. Even now, nearly 4 years later, I wake sometimes in the dead of night. Sure, I can hear it again. That slow, soft whistle echoing through the dark. And every time I lie there, heart pounding, waiting. Because what if the next time, it isn't just a memory? Story 6. I still remember the smell of damp pavement that night, like the air itself was warning me to stay inside. My name is Rachel Morgan, and I was 16 years old when everything changed. I lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Ashwood, Virginia, a place that wasn't quite rural, but not suburban either. The kind of town where people waved at each other on porches, where neighbors baked pies for church fundraisers, where nothing bad was supposed to happen. That's probably why my parents chose it when we moved here 4 years earlier, after my dad got transferred. Our street was lined with tall maples and oaks that pressed close against the houses. At night, the trees blotted out the sky so completely that the darkness felt alive. It was a Tuesday in early September, one of those sticky late summer days when the air feels heavy and restless. School had been miserable. The teachers were distracted. Half the kids were buzzing about a storm alert. Some hurricane off the coast had spun inland, downgraded but still strong enough to bring tornado watches, flash flood warnings, and every stay safe announcement over the intercom. I didn't care much. My bigger problem was getting home before the rain hit. By the time I pushed open our front door, the sky was bruised purple, the air humming like it was charged with electricity. I dropped my backpack on the couch and kicked off my sneakers, happy to beat the storm. Our house was old, built in the 70s, all creaky wood floors and narrow hallways. 2 stories. My bedroom was upstairs, second door on the right. Downstairs, the living room opened into the kitchen, and the front door sat only a few feet from the couch. Everything about it was familiar, safe, or at least it had always felt that way before. Before I go further, you should know something about me. I wasn't fearless, not even close. Ever since I was little, I hated being home alone during storms. Something about thunder rattling the glass, the power flickering, the wind moaning through the trees. It all made my stomach twist. My mom used to laugh and say I had an old soul, too cautious for my age. But after my older brother left for college last year, being alone became normal. My parents both worked long hours. Dad is a civil engineer, mom is a nurse pulling 12-hour shifts. I had learned to cook for myself, do laundry, lock the doors at night. I told myself I was independent now. The truth? Sometimes the silence at night got so thick it felt like it pressed against my skin. That Tuesday, around 4:30, the storm rolled in. And it didn't knock politely. It slammed into town like a freight train. The wind howled through the trees, bending branches until they whipped against the siding. Rain lashed the windows in sheets. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled dishes in the cupboards. The whole house groaned like an old man bracing against a blow. I grabbed the remote and turned the TV volume up, pretending not to notice how my heart sped up with every gust. Then my phone buzzed. A flash flood alert screamed at full volume, jolting me so bad I nearly dropped it. "God," I muttered, silencing the notification. Right then, Mom called. I answered fast. "Hey, everything okay?" Her voice was tight, rushed. "Rachel, listen. Your dad and I are stuck in town. Half the roads are underwater, and the cops blocked off the highway. We can't make it home tonight." My chest tightened. "Wait, what? You're not coming back?" "No, sweetie. We're going to stay at the hospital. They've got cots set up for staff families. You're safe there. Just lock the doors and don't go outside, okay?" I looked toward the window where rain pummeled the glass like fists. My throat felt dry. "Yeah, I'll be fine. I'll just watch TV or something." "Good girl." I could hear the stress in her voice, though she tried to soften it. "We'll call when we're settled. Keep your phone on you." The line clicked off, leaving me with the roar of the storm and the ache of sudden silence. Trying not to think too hard, I padded into the kitchen, popped a plate of leftover spaghetti into the microwave, and leaned against the counter, scrolling through my phone. The hum of the microwave almost masked it. Almost. A sound. A hollow, muffled thunk-thunk. I froze, head tilting toward the front door. Maybe it was a branch hitting the siding. Maybe debris. Maybe... The microwave beeped, making me flinch. I let out a shaky laugh. Just the wind. But then it came again. Knock. This time sharp. Deliberate. My chest went tight. Who would be out there in this storm? Nobody, that's who. Every muscle in my body locked up. I sat still, spaghetti forgotten, and stared at the door. Seconds dragged like hours. Finally, I forced myself to move. My feet made the floor creak as I crept to the peephole. The glass was fogged from condensation, but I could see nothing. Just streaks of gray rain and black shadows of trees thrashing. Still, I unlocked the chain and cracked the door open an inch. The porch was empty. Relief rushed through me like air after holding my breath too long, until my eyes drifted down. Footprints, dark, wet impressions leading straight to the porch. The rain hadn't washed them away yet, which meant they were fresh. My heart lurched. I slammed the door shut, locked it, double-checked the deadbolt. My hands shook as I whispered to myself, "Don't panic." Maybe they left. Maybe it was a neighbor. But neighbors didn't come knocking in weather like this. I sat back on the couch, food untouched, staring at the door until my eyes burned. The storm roared on. The clock ticked. Nothing else happened. At some point, exhaustion pulled me under. When I woke, the TV had timed out. The house sunk in darkness. The storm still raged, though softer now, like a beast growling instead of roaring. I grabbed my phone. Battery, 3%, 6 missed calls, 4 texts from Mom. "You okay? Staying here tonight. Roads closed. Call us when you can." I rubbed my face and sat up. That's when I heard it. A single heavy thud. Not thunder. Not the house settling. A footstep. And it came from above me. From my bedroom. The world tilted. Every instinct screamed, "Run." Instead, I slid off the couch, heart hammering so hard it hurt, and tiptoed toward the downstairs bathroom. My fingers fumbled with the lock until it clicked. I turned my phone brightness low and dialed 911 with shaking hands. When the operator answered, I whispered, "My name is Rachel Morgan. I live at 152 Creekside Lane. Someone's in my house." She started asking questions, but I muted the call enough to hear her faint voice while I listened. Upstairs, footsteps creaked. Slow, deliberate. 1, 2, 3. They stopped, then started again, coming toward the stairs. I bit down on my fist to stop any sound from escaping. The steps reached the bottom landing. Then silence. The storm filled the gap, wind hissing through cracks. Then, bang! The front door exploded inward. Voices shouted over the storm, "Police!" I bolted out, stumbling toward the entryway. Two officers stood dripping on the porch, flashlights cutting through the dark. Behind me, the house was silent again. They cleared every room. Upstairs, they found my bedroom door wide open, window pushed up, curtains snapping in the wind. In the kitchen, the sliding glass door was cracked, rain pooling on the floor. He was gone. Whoever he was, he had been inside. He had walked through my room. He had searched for me. And if the storm hadn't drowned out the sound of him breaking in, if I had gone upstairs when I first heard the knocking, I wouldn't be here to tell you this. To this day, I don't know who it was. Male, female, stranger, someone who knew me. What I do know is this: they weren't there to steal. They were patient, they waited, and they were there for me. Story 7. I never thought much about safety before. Honestly, I was one of those people who believed the world was mostly good, that strangers were just neighbors you hadn't met yet. My name is Emily Parker. I'm 27 years old, and 3 years ago, I bought a modest single-story house on Willow Creek Drive, tucked on the outer edge of a suburban town called Ashford, Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes from Pittsburgh. It wasn't a fancy place. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, a little yard out back, but it was mine, my peace. After years of sharing apartments with roommates who partied all night or left dirty dishes stacked in the sink, I craved silence. And after working 12-hour shifts as a respiratory therapist at St. Mary's Hospital, silence was sacred. My life had become a rhythm: work, home, dinner, couch, bed, repeat. Some people would call that boring. I called it survival. That night, though, that night broke the rhythm. It was the second week of April, one of those miserable, bone-chilling nights where rain felt endless. The forecast had warned of storms rolling through, and sure enough, by the time my shift ended at 8:15 p.m., the sky was a restless gray soup. Water slicked across the roads, fog rising from the asphalt, headlights cutting through the wet darkness. I remember gripping the wheel of my Honda CR-V, yawning, replaying the day in my head. 3 back-to-back code blues. A family crying in the ICU waiting room. My feet ached from standing. My chest felt heavy from everything I'd seen. When I finally turned onto Willow Creek Drive, I exhaled. Home. Quiet. My little street was always sleepy after dark. Houses lined neatly with trimmed hedges and porch lights glowing like fireflies. Tonight, though, almost every house was dark. Curtains drawn, blinds shut tight against the rain. I pulled into my driveway at 8:55. The rain hammered the roof of the car. My porch light flickered once, then steadied. I grabbed my work bag, pulled my hood tight, and dashed to the door. By the time I shoved the key into the lock, I was half soaked. Inside, warmth wrapped around me. The faint smell of vanilla from the candle I'd burned last night still lingered. I kicked off my sneakers, peeled off my wet jacket, and slipped into old gray sweatpants and a faded Penn State hoodie. Comfort, routine. The microwave hummed as I reheated leftover pasta. I curled on the couch with a blanket, the rain pattering against the windows like a lullaby. Netflix played something mindless in the background. My body relaxed, exhaustion pulling me under. And then came the knock. It wasn't gentle, it was sharp. Firm 3 quick pounds that made me freeze mid-bite. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 9:27 p.m. Nobody ever knocked this late. Not here. My heart picked up, the fork hovering in my hand. Slowly, I set it down and stood. The living room lights were on, too bright. Whoever was outside could see shadows moving inside. Barefoot, I padded across the hardwood and pressed my eye to the peephole. A man stood on my porch. He was soaked, water dripping off a dark green rain jacket. His hair clung to his forehead in wet strands. His face was pale under the porch light, his expression stiff, unreadable. Maybe early 30s. He wasn't anyone I recognized from the neighborhood. Not the guy who jogged past every morning. Not the couple 2 doors down. A stranger. I hesitated, then cracked the door 2 inches, chain still latched. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice cautious. For a moment, he just stared, his eyes locked on mine, unblinking. A cold ripple traveled down my spine. Then finally he spoke. "My dog," he said slowly, like each word cost him effort. "He jumped the fence, ran this way, you see him." Relief flickered, a lost dog. That explained it. But something felt wrong. His tone was flat, emotionless, like he was reciting a line. His gaze flicked past me into the house before settling back on my face. I haven't, sorry, I said quickly. But I hope you find him. He nodded once. No smile, no thank you. Just a curt nod. Then he turned and walked off into the rain. I shut the door, locking it this time. Weird guy, maybe just stressed. Losing a pet sucked, still his eyes. I couldn't shake the way they'd look through me. 15 minutes later, another knock. Louder, sharper. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to look. I already knew. But I forced myself to the door and peeked through the peephole. It was him. Again. Same drenched jacket. Same pale face. But now his eyes burned with something harder. Frustration, maybe anger. I opened the door a crack. Chain still locked. What is it? My voice was firmer. He pointed toward the side of my house. I saw him run into your backyard, he said flatly. Can I go back there and look? The way he said it, it wasn't a question. It was a demand. Every instinct in me screamed no, but my brain scrambled to rationalize. Maybe he really did see the dog. Maybe this was innocent. Yeah, you can walk around, I said finally, forcing calm into my tone. His eyes held mine too long. Then, thank you. As I began to close the door, he stepped forward like he expected me to open it wider. My pulse spiked. I slammed it shut, locking it tight. I moved to the kitchen where the back door had a glass panel. From there, I watched as he paced along the fence line, his head swiveling like he was scanning for something. But every few seconds, he glanced back toward the house. Just let him look, I whispered to myself. He'll leave. But when I turned my head for a second and looked back, he was right at the glass, face inches from mine. I stumbled backward, my hips slamming into the counter. My breath caught. He didn't move, just stared. Rainwater dripped from his hair. His hand rested flat on the glass, pressing, testing. What the hell are you doing? I shouted, voice trembling. He tilted his head slightly. I think he might be inside. Can you let me in to check? My stomach plummeted. No, I snapped. He's not in here. You need to leave. His expression hardened. His hand pressed harder against the glass. Then, bang, bang. He slammed his palm against it, each strike louder than the last. Let me in, let me in. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man. He's trying to get into my house. He won't leave. The moment he saw the phone at my ear, his body went still. His face blanked out again, empty, unreadable. And then, just like that, he turned and walked into the rain. The cops arrived 10 minutes later. By then, he was gone. I gave them his description: tall, pale, early 30s, dark rain jacket. They promised to patrol the area, but without a crime, there wasn't much they could do. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak made my chest tighten. Every shadow felt alive. His face, pressed against the glass, replayed in my head until morning. A week later, scrolling through my phone on a rare day off, I saw the headline: Woman assaulted in Ashford home. Police seek suspect. My heart seized. The details spilled out. Just 2 streets over, a woman opened her door to a man claiming to look for his dog. It turned violent fast. She survived. Barely. The suspect fled. I dropped my phone, nausea crashing through me. That could have been me. If I had unlatched the chain, if I had opened the door just a little wider, I might not be here to tell this story. Story 8, I still remember that summer like it was burned into my brain. It was July of 2014, one of those sticky, suffocating summers in western Pennsylvania when even the nights didn't cool down. I had just turned 16 that March, which felt like a big deal at the time. 16 was supposed to mean freedom, driving, maybe even dating. But for me, it mostly meant being stuck at home with more responsibilities than I really wanted. My name is Megan Carter, and that summer, home was a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex called Ridgeview Terrace. Sounds fancy, right? It wasn't. It was one of those old brick buildings with peeling paint on the stair railings and window air conditioners that rattled so loudly you had to turn the TV volume up to 30 just to hear. The place wasn't terrible, though. My mom did her best to make it feel like a home. She worked double shifts as a nurse at the local hospital, and my dad, when he was still around, had worked construction. But by that summer, it had been just Mom, me, and my little brother Ethan, who was 4 at the time. Dad had left a couple of years earlier, and we didn't hear from him much. That meant Mom leaned on me a lot. At 16, I wasn't just the big sister. I was practically a second parent, making mac and cheese for Ethan, cleaning up his toy explosions, making sure he didn't stick crayons into the DVD player. Most days I didn't mind. He was sweet, and I knew Mom was exhausted. But there were moments I hated it too. Moments when I just wanted to be a normal teenager instead of the built-in babysitter. That summer was strange because Mom's schedule had shifted to mostly night shifts. She'd leave around 6:30 in the evening and wouldn't be home until almost 8 a.m. the next morning, which meant for the first time ever, I was the one staying home alone at night. Well, alone with Ethan, but still. The first couple nights weren't bad. I actually kind of liked it. I got to stay up late, eat snacks in the living room without Mom nagging, watch whatever I wanted on Netflix. Ethan usually crashed by 9 o'clock after a bath and a story, and then I had the apartment to myself. But there was something about that building, about Ridgeview Terrace, that I could never put my finger on. It wasn't haunted looking, nothing dramatic like that, just off. The halls always smelled faintly of mildew, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and there was this weird echo when you walked to the laundry room at the end of the hall. Even during the day, it was too quiet. I used to joke with Olivia, my best friend since middle school, that the building felt like it had bad vibes. She'd roll her eyes, but sometimes when she came over, she admitted she didn't like walking down the hall to our place either. The day it happened was July 17th, a Thursday. I remember because it was hot enough to melt the soles off my flip-flops. Mom had left early for her shift, kissing Ethan on the forehead, giving me a quick hug, and reminding me for the 100th time, "Lock the door, Meg, and don't forget the laundry downstairs." I rolled my eyes. "I know, Mom." She gave me a look, the kind that meant she didn't fully trust me to remember. Then she was gone, the door shutting with that heavy apartment echo. Ethan was sprawled on the living room rug, building something with his blocks. "Want grilled cheese or mac and cheese for dinner?" I asked. "Mac," he said without looking up. I made it, washed the pan, and spent the rest of the evening half watching a show while Ethan played. Around 8:30, I tucked him into his little twin bed, read him Goodnight Moon, and turned on his nightlight. He was asleep before I even got to the end. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every creak. I curled up on the couch with my phone, scrolling mindlessly, the hum of the old AC unit in the window filling the silence. That's when I noticed the basket of dirty clothes still sitting by the bathroom door. "Ugh, right," I muttered. "Mom's laundry. I didn't want to go to the laundry room." It was down at the far end of the hall near the stairwell. The hall always felt weirdly colder than the apartment, and the stairwell door had this tiny wired glass window that I hated walking past. Still, I figured it was better to get it over with. I grabbed the basket, slipped into my sandals, and stepped into the hallway. The air was different out there, like it always was. Cooler, heavier. My flip-flops slapped softly against the scratched linoleum as I walked past the stairwell door. My eyes flicked to the little square window automatically. Empty. Just the metal railing and the dim yellow stairwell light. I let out a slow breath and hurried on. The laundry room smelled like bleach and damp fabric. The overhead fluorescent buzzed and flickered as I loaded the washer. When I shoved the heavy door closed, the sound echoed down the hall. That's when I heard it. Click, click, click. Sharp, metallic, like the sound of a lighter being flicked over and over. I froze, my hand still on the washer door. My eyes darted around the small room. Nothing, just the hum of the machines. "Probably somebody's lock," I whispered to myself. I shoved the door open and stepped back into the hall. It was silent now. No clicking, no sound at all. I walked quickly back to the apartment, locked the door behind me, and tried to shake it off. By 10 o'clock, I was stretched out on the couch, earbuds in, watching YouTube videos. The AC hummed steadily. Every so often, I thought I heard something in the hall, but told myself it was just neighbors. Then, click, click, click. This time it was unmistakable. Right outside the apartment. I muted my phone and sat up, heart pounding. The sound came again, deliberate, like someone wanted me to hear it. Click, click, click. I tiptoed to the door, my breath shallow. Slowly, I pressed my eye to the peephole. At first, I thought it was empty. Just the dim hall, the cracked beige paint on the opposite wall. But then I saw it. A figure. Not a man, not exactly. More like a silhouette. All black, as if the shadows had pulled themselves into the shape of a person. It stood completely still, its back to me. Then its head tilted, just slightly, and the clicking sound came again. Click, click, click. I stumbled back from the door, almost dropping my phone. My first thought was to call Mom. My second thought was, what do I even say? Instead, I ran to Ethan's room. He was still asleep, his little chest rising and falling under his Spider-Man blanket. I shut the door quietly, locked it, and sat on the bed clutching my phone. Minutes crawled by. No sound, no footsteps. Finally, I heard the front door open. My heart lurched into my throat. Then, Meg? It was Olivia. She dropped her purse on the counter and gave me a weird look when I rushed out of the bedroom. Jesus, what's your problem? She asked. My voice shook. There was somebody in the hall, a man or something. I don't know. It was all black, and it was making this clicking noise. Her smirk faded. What did it look like? I told her. Her face went pale. Megan, I've seen it too. What? She nodded slowly. Not just once, a few times. When I come home late, it's there. Sometimes in the corner of the hall, sometimes in my room. My stomach dropped. Why didn't you tell me? I thought I was losing my mind, she whispered. That night, I begged her to let me sleep in her room. She agreed. We left a lamp on, the fan humming. I wrapped myself in the blanket, trying to convince myself it was just some creep, some stranger messing with us. But then, around 3:30 a.m., I woke up to a sound. Click, click, click. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from under the bed. Ethan's cat, Milo, hissed and backed into the corner, fur bristling. And then, I saw it. A long black arm sliding out from beneath the bed, fingers too thin, curling against the carpet. I couldn't even scream at first. My throat locked. Then instinct kicked in. I shouted, jolting Olivia awake. She sat up annoyed. What the hell, Meg? But when I looked again, the arm was gone. Neither of us slept that night. We kept the lights on until morning, whispering, jumping at every sound. A few months later, we moved out of Ridgeview Terrace. Mom finally saved enough for a little house on the edge of town. I've never been so relieved to pack boxes in my life. Nothing strange has happened since. No clicking, no shadows, no black figure waiting in the hall. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I think I hear it again. Click, click, click. And I wonder if it stayed behind in that apartment, or if it followed me. Story 9. I never liked being left home alone, though I'd never admit it out loud. At 17, you're supposed to be too old for that kind of thing. Afraid of creaky floors, shadows outside, or the sound of the house settling. But deep down, I always felt uneasy when the house was too quiet, when there wasn't an adult presence grounding the place. We lived in a suburban neighborhood in upstate New York, a town called Ridgewood, where nothing exciting ever happened. At least that's what people told themselves. It was one of those middle-class places full of minivans, trim lawns, neighbors who waved while walking their dogs, and a Main Street diner where everyone seemed to know your name. Safe, ordinary. My family's house sat at the end of Willow Creek Drive, tucked into a cul-de-sac with 5 other homes. Ours was a 2-story colonial with white siding and blue shutters. A maple tree out front turned bright red every fall, littering the yard with crisp leaves that crunched under your shoes. The kind of house where, from the outside, you'd never expect anything bad to happen. That Saturday night in late October started like any other. The air was cool but not freezing yet, the kind of evening where you needed a hoodie but not a coat. The smell of wood smoke drifted from a neighbor's chimney, and the street was quiet, except for the occasional car rolling by. Inside, things were pretty normal too. My mom and dad, Eric and Sandra Bennett, were getting ready to head out. It was their wedding anniversary, and they had reservations at an Italian restaurant about 30 minutes away. They didn't go out much, so this was kind of a big deal for them. "Are you sure you'll be okay for a few hours?" Mom asked as she adjusted her earrings in the hallway mirror. She always had this motherly tone, warm but laced with worry. "Mom, I'm 17, I said, trying not to sound impatient. "Not 7. I'll be fine." "I wasn't just asking about you," she replied, nodding toward my younger sister, Maddie. Maddie was 13, though you'd think she was already 25 by the way she acted. She was curled up on the couch, scrolling through TikTok, earbuds in, completely oblivious to the conversation. "Yeah, we'll be fine," I said quickly. Dad chuckled as he slipped on his jacket. "See? They'll survive. Don't worry so much." Mom still looked unconvinced, but she gave me a small smile. "All right, call us if you need anything, and don't forget to lock the doors." "Yes, Mom," I said with exaggerated obedience, giving her a mock salute. With that, they were out the door, their laughter fading into the night as their car pulled away. And just like that, the house felt different, bigger, emptier, quieter. I dropped onto the couch beside Maddie, stealing a handful of the popcorn she had made earlier. The living room lights cast a soft glow across the furniture, and the only other illumination came from the massive sliding glass door that led to our backyard. At night, that door always creeped me out. Beyond the glass was just blackness, trees, shadows, the unknown. Maddie yanked out an earbud. "Horror movie night?" she asked, her eyes glinting with excitement. "Why is that always your first choice when Mom and Dad aren't home?" I groaned. "Because it's fun," she grinned, already grabbing the remote. "Come on, don't be lame." I rolled my eyes but let her pick. She landed on Insidious. Great. For the next 40 minutes, things felt almost normal. The movie played, we ate popcorn, the heater hummed softly in the background. But then it happened. Subtle at first, a sound, the metallic scrape of a key sliding into the front door lock. I froze. So did Maddie. We both turned toward the hallway. The movie's sound faded into nothing. The key twisted once, twice, deliberate. "Dad?" I called out, trying to sound casual, though my voice cracked. No answer. "Dad?" I tried again, louder this time. Silence. Maddie's face had gone pale in the TV's glow. "Why isn't he saying anything?" she whispered. The knob turned again, slow, testing the deadbolt. I shot up from the couch, my heart hammering. The front door stayed shut, but I knew what I heard. Before I could move, another sound froze me in place. From behind us, a soft tap-tap against the sliding glass door. Maddie gasped and spun toward it. The curtains were half drawn, the darkness outside pressing against the glass like a living thing. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't go near it." But I was already backing toward the phone in the hallway. My hands shook as I picked up the receiver. Dead. Not even a dial tone. "No, no, no," I muttered, slamming it down. Maddie bolted into the kitchen, returning with the biggest knife we owned. "We need to hide," she said, her voice trembling. The tapping at the glass grew louder, sharper. Then silence. We held our breath. The quiet lasted only a moment. Click. The sound of the front door's deadbolt sliding open. My stomach dropped. "Run," I hissed, grabbing Maddie's arm. We sprinted upstairs, our footsteps pounding on the wood. I slammed my bedroom door and twisted the lock, though it felt like locking paper against fire. "Call 911!" Maddie gasped, fumbling with her phone. She froze, her screen red. No service. "That storm earlier," she whispered. "Dad said it might mess with the towers." Bootsteps echoed downstairs. Slow. Measured. Whoever it was wanted us to hear. My chest tightened as I pulled Maddie into the closet. We squeezed inside, leaving the door cracked just enough to see out. The footsteps climbed the stairs, one by one. Then a voice, low, calm, too calm. "I know you're up here." Maddie clamped a hand over her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. The steps reached the landing. Our door handle rattled, locked. A soft chuckle. "Smart kids," the voice said. Then came the first kick. Wood splintering. The second. The door burst open. Boots on carpet. A shadow stretched across the closet crack. Breathing, steady, patient. The handle turned. I raised the knife, my whole body shaking. The door slid open. A man stood there. Tall, pale, eyes that were too calm, a smile that didn't belong. "Found you." I swung. The blade cut across his forearm. He hissed, stumbling back. "Run!" I screamed, shoving Maddie out. We barreled past him, down the stairs, through the open front door, into the freezing night. We screamed for help, sprinting barefoot across the lawn. Porch lights flicked on. A neighbor shouted. By the time police arrived, he was gone. No fingerprints, no footprints except muddy tracks that led out the back door and vanished into the woods. For weeks, Maddie couldn't sleep without the lights on. Mom and Dad never left us home alone again. And me, I still hear it sometimes, that calm voice in the dark. "I know you're up here." Because whoever he was never caught, and I don't think he ever stopped looking. Story 10, I never imagined that my first taste of freedom would become one of the darkest memories of my life. It was the summer of 2014. I had just turned 24, and for the first time ever, I was ready to live on my own. No more roommates, no more college dorms, no more parents hovering over my shoulder. Just me, my paycheck, and a place to finally call mine. I'd been working as a junior analyst for a supply chain firm in Clearwater Springs, Ohio, a quiet mid-sized suburb about 40 minutes outside Columbus. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and I was proud of it. After months of saving, I finally signed the lease on a small one-bedroom apartment in a beige brick complex called Maple Ridge Court. It wasn't fancy. Peeling paint on the stair rails, carpet that had seen better days, and the faint smell of old cigarettes lingering in the hallway. But to me, it felt like the start of everything. My parents, David and Linda, helped me move in on a bright Saturday morning. We carried box after box up the narrow stairs until my new place was filled with cardboard and the faint squeak of movers' tape. I remember standing in the middle of the living room after they left, hugging myself, half thrilled, half nervous. The place was mine. Every creak, every shadow, every locked door. Mine. That first evening, I was unpacking books onto a shelf when I heard it. Thump. A heavy, sudden sound above me. I froze, looking at the ceiling. Then another, like someone dropping something solid onto the floor. I told myself it was nothing. Apartment living meant noise, right? Someone moving furniture, dragging a chair. But the sounds didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, they became part of my nights. Thuds, bangs, and the unmistakable slam of something heavy hitting the floor. Sometimes my ceiling light rattled faintly, as if the impact had traveled through the beams themselves. Then came the shouting. At first, muffled arguments. Voices indistinct, gender unclear. But gradually they sharpened into the clear cadence of a man and a woman. "You don't tell me what to do," a male voice barked once, loud enough that I dropped the dish I was washing. "Move! Get out of my way!" A woman's voice shouted back another night, shaking and raw. The fights weren't time-bound. Sometimes at 3 in the afternoon, sometimes at 2 in the morning, always explosive, always violent in tone. I would sit on my couch pretending to read while my stomach twisted with unease. One night around midnight, I was scrolling on my phone in bed when it erupted again. "You walk out that door and you'll regret it," the man bellowed. A crash shook my ceiling. Something shattered. My pulse spiked so hard I had to sit up, clutching my phone in both hands. Then footsteps. Hurried, pounding. Someone running. A door upstairs flung open, then the front entrance to the building slammed shut. I hesitated, torn between calling the police and minding my own business. But curiosity won. I slipped on a hoodie, padded out into the dimly lit hallway, and crept up the first few stairs. Their door was wide open. The man appeared suddenly in the frame. Tall, maybe mid-30s, with dark, messy hair and a scar along his jawline. His chest heaved like he just sprinted a mile. His eyes snapped to me instantly. "Who the hell are you?" His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. I live downstairs," I stammered. "I just heard yelling. Is everything—" "Everything's fine." Mind your own business. Slam. The door shut so hard the frame rattled. I stood frozen, heart hammering, then retreated quietly back to my unit, locking the door with shaking hands. I barely slept that night. For a few days after, silence. No fights, no stomps, no glass shattering. I convinced myself she had left him. Maybe it was over. I was wrong. It was a Wednesday night, close to 2 in the morning, when I jolted awake to a thud directly outside my door. Groggy, disoriented, I grabbed my phone and tiptoed to the peephole. At first, nothing. Just the dim yellow hallway light flickering. Then, 2 men walked past. Broad shoulders, dark hoodies, moving with deliberate purpose. I'd never seen them before. Maple Ridge's outer door was always locked. How had they gotten in? Did someone buzz them? Did they have a key? They disappeared upstairs, and for a moment I thought maybe I was imagining the threat. Maybe they were just visiting. 10 minutes later, the front door slammed again. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Louder this time. I looked again. The same 2 men. And this time, the scar-jawed man from upstairs came down to meet them. At first, their voices were low, tense murmurs. Then one of the strangers shoved him hard into the wall, right beside my door. The impact rattled the wood, shaking through my bones. "You ever go near my sister again? I swear to God, I'll cut your throat," one of the men roared. "Wait, please!" The upstairs man's voice cracked, desperate. Then the fist came, sickening thuds, wet, meaty impacts, the sound of bone against flesh. I crouched on the floor inside my apartment, both hands clamped over my mouth, trembling. My heart pounded so loudly I thought they'd hear it. "Get up!" one of them snarled. Another slam against the wall. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, footsteps retreated. The downstairs door slammed. Silence. I stayed curled on the floor long after, too terrified to move. 2 days later, the man upstairs was gone. No goodbye, no movers, no sign he'd ever been there. Just vanished. When my lease came up, I didn't renew. I left, swallowing the penalty without a second thought. I couldn't live there with that memory burned into the walls. Now, years later, I live in a small condo. Quiet neighborhood, no shared walls, no late-night footsteps in the hall. But sometimes, lying awake in the dark, I still hear it. That echo. "You ever go near my sister again? I'll cut your throat." And the sound of fists slamming the wall inches from where I once sat, too afraid to breathe. Story 11. I was 14 the year it happened. Looking back, I guess I always thought bad things only happened to other people. You see stories on the news, break-ins, accidents, people disappearing, and you convince yourself that your little corner of the world is immune, safe, normal. My name is Jacob Miller, and in the fall of 2007, I lived with my mom and older sister in a small 2-bedroom rental house in Maplewood, Ohio. Maplewood wasn't anything special, just another Midwest suburb with cracked sidewalks, old street lamps, and neighbors who kept mostly to themselves. Our place was on Meadowbrook Lane, at the very end of a cul-de-sac. The house itself was plain, beige siding, a sagging porch with a rusted swing that squeaked if you sat on it. Inside, it was cramped. Tiny kitchen with outdated appliances, narrow hallway, and just one bathroom we all had to share. My mom worked 2 jobs back then, day shifts at a diner and nights at a grocery store, so she was hardly home. My sister Emily was 17, and like most teenagers, she was always itching to be anywhere but with family. That left me alone a lot more than I probably should have been. The thing is, I didn't really mind. At 14, being left home alone felt more like freedom than loneliness. I could eat cereal for dinner, blast my music, stay up way too late watching horror movies I wasn't supposed to. It felt like my little kingdom, even if the creaks in the walls sometimes made me jump. That Saturday night was supposed to be no different. It was late October, the air outside cool enough that you could smell the sharpness of fallen leaves. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, the street was wrapped in that early autumn darkness that always came quicker than you expected. Mom had left for her night shift around 7:30, pulling on her heavy coat as she stood by the door. "You sure you'll be okay?" she asked, looking between me and Emily. "I'm fine," Emily said without even glancing up from her phone. "I'll probably head out for a bit anyway." Mom sighed, already tired. Her eyes flicked to me. Jake? Yeah, I'll be good, I said, half distracted by the video game controller in my hands. She leaned down, kissed my forehead, and gave the same instructions she always did. Keep the doors locked. Don't open for anyone. Call me if you need me. Then she was gone, her car headlights sweeping across the yard before vanishing into the night. Emily left not long after, shouting over her shoulder, "I'll be back later," and the front door slammed shut. Just like that, I was alone. I threw myself into my game, the glow of the TV the only light in the living room. Hours slipped by in a haze of flashing screens and button mashing. Occasionally, I'd hear a car pass outside or the wind scrape a branch against the siding, but nothing out of the ordinary. When I finally glanced at the clock, it was 11:48 p.m. My eyes were sore, my stomach growled, and the silence of the house pressed down the moment I switched the console off. I padded into the kitchen, flicking on the dim overhead light. The fridge hummed as I pulled out a soda and a leftover slice of pizza, eating cold because I was too lazy to heat it. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind, a faint rattle, a scrape. But then it came again, sharper this time, the unmistakable sound of metal against glass. I froze, soda can halfway to my mouth. It was coming from the back of the house, from the sliding glass door that opened onto our tiny backyard. I set the can down slowly, my ears straining. Scrape, grind, like someone forcing the track of the door. My chest tightened. Mom always complained about that sliding door. It stuck so badly you had to shove it with your whole weight to make it move. Nobody ever used it. Nobody except us. I stood completely still, my heart hammering so loud it drowned out the hum of the fridge. Then came the sound I'll never forget. Thunk. The solid weight of footsteps on the kitchen floor. Someone was inside. Panic locked my body. My first thought was that Emily had come home. But no, she never used the back door, and she would have shouted, slammed her way inside like she always did. These footsteps were different, slow, heavy, deliberate. I darted down the hallway, my socks sliding on the linoleum, and slipped into my bedroom at the very end. I didn't close the door all the way, I never did, but I pulled the blanket over me and lay stiff as stone, trying to control my breathing. Through the narrow crack, I could see the hallway faintly lit by the kitchen light. The footsteps grew closer. Creak, the floorboards by the bathroom. Creak, outside my sister's room. Then I saw him, just a shadow at first. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, his outline stretching across the wall as he moved past my doorway. He didn't look in, didn't speak, just walked with that slow, purposeful stride that made my stomach knot with dread. The bathroom light flicked on. Water ran for a second, then silence. I pressed my face into the pillow, every muscle screaming not to move. Minutes crawled by like hours. He moved into Emily's room. I heard drawers being pulled open, things hitting the floor, a low grunt of frustration. Then footsteps again, back and forth, living room, kitchen, hallway, my sister's room, over and over. He wasn't stealing a TV or rushing out the door. He was searching for something or someone. And the longer it went on, the clearer it became. He knew I was there, because every time he passed my door, he slowed, paused, just long enough to make my heart stop, like he was daring me to make a sound. I wanted to grab the phone in the kitchen, but it might as well have been miles away. I wanted to run, but the only way out was past him, so I stayed frozen. 20 minutes, maybe more. My throat was dry, my body ached, sweat soaked through my shirt. Finally, I heard the sliding door again. That awful grind. Then silence. I didn't move for another 10 minutes. When I finally sat up, my whole body shook. The house was still, the backyard dark. I crept through the rooms on shaky legs. The back door was shut, locked. Emily's room was a mess, drawers yanked open, clothes scattered. But nothing was missing. Not the TV, not Mom's old jewelry box. Nothing. Just chaos. When Emily came home around 1:30, I practically tackled her at the door, blurting out everything. She didn't believe me at first, thought I was just messing with her. But when she saw her room, her face went pale. Mom came home at dawn. I begged her to call the police, but she shook her head. Too tired, too stressed, maybe too scared. "Nobody was here, Jake," she said firmly, like saying it would make it true. It was just a dream. But I knew better, because whoever that man was, he hadn't taken anything. He hadn't wanted things. He'd wanted me. Story 12. I was 22 years old the night everything changed for me. Back then, life wasn't perfect, but it finally felt like mine. I had just moved out of my parents' house in late spring of 2015, settling into a small ground-floor apartment in Ridgewood Heights, a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't anything fancy, peeling paint on the shutters, creaky pipes, and a patchy lawn that the landlord swore he'd fix next month. But to me, it was freedom. My name is Daniel Harper, and at the time I was juggling part-time college classes with a late evening shift at a diner off the interstate. Most nights I came home exhausted but relieved, proud that I was finally standing on my own. The neighbors mostly kept to themselves. A retired couple lived upstairs, the kind who waved politely but never invited conversation. On the other side, a single mom with a toddler who cried at odd hours. Nothing about the place screamed danger, and maybe that's why I was careless. Maybe that's why I didn't notice the small things, like the faint drag marks near my bedroom window, or the way my front door sometimes felt just a little looser on its hinges than it had the day before. At 22, you think you're invincible. You think bad things only happen to strangers you read about online. I learned the hard way that sometimes the stranger comes for you. It started on a Thursday. I had worked the dinner rush and didn't clock out until almost midnight. By the time I got home, it was nearly 12:30 a.m. I kicked off my shoes, reheated leftover pizza, and flopped onto the couch. My routine was simple: eat, shower, maybe watch some videos on my laptop, then sleep. That night, I cracked my bedroom window open before bed. It was warm out, and the apartment didn't have AC. The window was only a couple of feet off the ground, facing the narrow strip of side yard where the wooden fence separated my building from the neighbors. The screen was flimsy, but I figured it was enough. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. Then it hit me: cigarette smoke. It was strong, too strong to be drifting in from the street. My heart thudded as I sat up in bed. I remember whispering out loud, like saying it would make it less terrifying. Probably the upstairs guy smoking on his balcony again. But no, the smell wasn't faint. It was heavy, close. Then I heard it, a soft scratch against the wooden frame of the window, a slow exhale. I reached for the lamp on my nightstand, hands shaking. But instead of the switch, my hand brushed something warm. Skin, a shoulder. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Slowly I turned. There was a man sitting on the edge of my bed, a complete stranger, shirtless, smoking a cigarette. His eyes, glassy and hollow, were fixed right on me. I couldn't speak at first. My mind refused to process it. Then I whispered, voice cracking, "Who the hell are you? Get out! Get out!" He tilted his head, almost amused, and said in a low, raspy voice, "Didn't mean to wake you." The casualness of it chilled me more than if he'd screamed. Instinct kicked in. I shoved him hard, bolted upright, and yelled, "Get out! Get the F-word out!" He stumbled, not angry, just startled. Then in one smooth motion, he darted toward the open window. With a flick of his wrist, he yanked the screen aside and slipped out into the night. I slammed the window shut, locked it, and dragged my dresser in front of it, hands shaking so violently I could barely grip the wood. When I finally gathered the courage to peek outside, the screen was propped neatly against the siding, not bent, not broken, neatly, like he'd done this before. I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner with every light on, phone in hand, waiting for morning. The police came later. They took a report, but nothing came of it. The landlord shrugged. "Lock your windows." I tried to convince myself it was over, that he wouldn't come back, but I was wrong. 2 weeks later, Saturday morning, my parents were out of town visiting relatives. I had the weekend off, alone in the apartment. Around 10 a.m., I was gaming on my desktop in the living room, lost in a match when I heard it click, the sound of my front door unlocking. At first I thought I imagined it, but then the door creaked open slowly. I spun around, heart racing. The door stood wide open. "Mom? Dad?" I called out. No answer. I texted both, still hours away. Every nerve in my body screamed run. But I didn't. I walked to the door, peered outside. The driveway was empty. The street was empty. I closed the door, locked it, and tried to convince myself maybe I'd left it unlocked earlier. That's when I heard it. Zip! A faint zipper sound coming from my bedroom. I should have run. I should have called the cops right then. But shock makes you stupid. I crept down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. My bedroom door was cracked. I pushed it slowly. Everything looked normal, except my garment rack, the one I used instead of a closet, was slightly shifted. The zipper sound again, louder this time, coming from the fabric cover. With trembling hands, I unzipped it just an inch, and there he was, the same man, hunched inside, clutching a knife. His face lit up when he saw me. He smiled and whispered, "Hey." I didn't think. I ran, bolted down the hall, slammed the bedroom door shut behind me, grabbed the house phone, and sprinted outside. My hands shook so bad I dropped my keys twice before finally locking the door from the outside. I dialed 911, breathless, sobbing, "Someone's inside! He has a knife! Please hurry!" The cops arrived within minutes, though it felt like hours. They stormed inside, guns drawn. I stood in the street, clutching the phone, unable to stop shaking. When they dragged him out in cuffs, my knees nearly buckled. It was him, the same hollow-eyed man from my bed. And he didn't look afraid or angry. He looked empty, like getting caught meant nothing. One officer later told me, "He was looking for you when we found him, checking the closets, the bathroom, the kitchen." That night still haunts me because I can't stop asking myself, what if I hadn't heard the zipper? What if I'd been asleep? Would I even be alive right now? I moved out 2 weeks later, broke my lease, took on extra shifts to afford a second-floor unit across town. I don't sleep with the windows open anymore. I double-check every lock. Sometimes I check my closets twice before bed, because once you've had a stranger sitting on your bed in the dark, watching you sleep, you never really feel safe again.